Greetings and welcome to a special alpha showcase video for the Morrowind mod The Elder Scrolls 3 Empire by CarrotFerret. This mod, despite being in an alpha state, is actually available for download from Morrowind Nexus. And today we're just going to be going over some of the things that you'll find in the alpha release. First and foremost, the Empire Alpha was released last year, but the author, as far as I know, is still indeed working on it. I think she occasionally posts screenshots on Tumblr, so hopefully we'll eventually see a full release. And second, unlike most of the other mods that we've featured before, Empire is not a province mod or a major landmass mod that's aiming to add some big new landmass to the game. The best way to describe Empire would be as an adventure mod, I would say. It has more in common with the East Empire Trading Company expansion, the Adronicon, and to a certain degree Apostates of Oblivion than it does the Stros M'Coy, Province Cyrodiil, or Skyrim Home of the Nords. And anyway, we'll just be looking at some of the features and locations in this showcase, and of course you'll find a download link for Empire down in the video description below. So let's go ahead and get started, and essentially what this mod does is adds train stations, and yes, you heard that correctly, train stations to a number of cities here on Vvardenfell, including Dagonfell, Nissus, and Ebonheart. It turns out the Empire has opened up a Dwemer train line that goes underground all the way from Dagonfell to Dragonstall on the Skyrim and Hammerfall border, and even further to Wayrest in High Rock, and I believe it's called the Northern Rail Service. And anyway, underneath each of the three cities or train stations on Vvardenfell, you'll find massive underground Dwemer chambers where giant Dwemer trains sit idle, ready to take you across the continent of Tamriel to a number of different locations. Different towns and cities obviously have options to go to different locations, so the Dagonfell branch of the train line is actually a bit on the small side. So here you can see the Nissus station, which is quite a bit bigger, and you can see some more of the Dwemer trains here. And you know, the Nissus station acts as a sort of cargo hub, transporting the Quama eggs that get mined here to other towns and cities around Tamriel, providing food to the Empire. This might not be the most strictly speaking lore-friendly idea, but on the flip side, it doesn't really contradict the lore either, so it's fine in my book. And in any event, this one does have some dialogue that goes a bit into this new rail line, though since this is an alpha preview, most of the dialogue and indeed most of the documents that will eventually be included in Empire still haven't been added in yet, and for that matter most of the locations we'll be visiting also don't really have any NPCs, or if they do they only have a small number of NPCs. Again, most of that will be added in with a later version. Now, speaking of those areas without NPCs, we're going to be stopping by one of our first major locations on our journey across the Empire, a small shack town built along the underground Dwemer railways here, where traders and merchants meet to sell their wares. We're just going to do a quick flyby of this area before we move on, and you can tell the small town is already, fairly detailed with lots of cluttered merchant stalls and the like, and even if there are no merchants yet. And likewise, pretty much all these shacks already have interiors, and it should be noted that the author does already have dialogue and quests written up for implementation, and she could just use a bit of help getting everything ported into the editor. So if you're a quest smarter with some, spare time to help out with the more tedious aspect of quest implementation, you should, send CarrotFerret a message on Morrowind Nexus. And anyway, just getting back to the town here, this entire shack village is pretty much contained in this giant Dwemer hall, right below the main tracks. And you'll notice there's a lot of verticality in the design, with shacks stacked up on one another in various planks and gangways, providing some upper level streets. Now, real quick, we're going to be taking a look at some of the interiors you'll find in this small shanty village. And this first one is a bit of, well, I guess you could say a sort of shack manor, where the residents have built up and connected several shacks together to provide for a number of rooms, including a dining room and a couple of bedrooms. And here's another shack interior that we'll be briefly stopping in at, and you can tell that each of these shacks is fairly unique and cluttered, and as far as I can tell there's no copy and pasted interiors here, which is always a plus in my book. And in addition to various new locations and Dwemer railroads, you'll also find a number of new dungeons for you to fight through and explore, some of which have already been implemented with hostile encounters in the current alpha build. And as you might imagine, a few of these are going to be Dwemer dungeons, buried alongside the Dwemer train stations and railroads, just waiting for some adventurer to discover them. And of course, some of these dungeons can be quite big, and even a bit maze-like if I'm being honest. Though of course, they're not always empty, and they do often have, still some furnishings and the remains of their former Dwemer masters, as you can see here with the old Dwemer dining halls and the like. Even though this mod is in an alpha state, I'd say there's actually several hours worth of dungeon delving and exploring in this current build, though there's still a few dungeons, or at least dungeon entrances, that I noticed that still don't have interiors. So, you know, probably the finished product will have even more dungeons for you to check out. And next up, we're going to be stopping by the train station underneath. I believe this is Snowhawk Mountain, but don't quote me on that. And this station actually has access to the surface, and we'll be taking a look at that in a moment. But first, you've really just got to admire these massive Dwemer trains. There's obviously some very cool and creative locations included in this mod, and some of these train stations can be, you know, quite epic looking. The author clearly has a pretty good eye for design, if I do say so myself. And heading up to the surface here, you'll find the area around Snowhawk Mountain, or rather, what I think is the area around Snowhawk Mountain anyway. Again, I may have gotten that mixed up with another location, but either way, you'll notice that the Elder Scrolls 3 Empire only uses interior world spaces, and that means there's actually no exterior landmasses to speak of. So, you know, Empire is actually compatible with all other province and landmass mods, including Tamriel Rebuilt, Province Cyrodiil, Skyrim Home of the Nords, and of course Morrowind Rebirth. And instead of landmasses, Empire uses these interior terrain tilesets like landscapes, and I believe this is actually one of Shannon's tilesets here. And this is an effective way to build interior-based hills, forests, and what have you. Now, Snowhawk Mountain here is, I believe, somewhere in Skyrim, or it's supposed to be anyway. And you can tell there's a bit of an Imperial fort here, with a small village and some farmsteads surrounding it. There's also some roads going out to some other areas, but again, Empire is not a landmass mod, it's more of an adventure mod. So you won't really be able to explore the whole province of Skyrim or anything like that. You'll just get to explore some of the nearby areas, which includes dungeons and presumably, once the full mod is released, quests to go on. And anyway, we're going to once again just take a quick look at a couple of interiors here before we move on to our next area, including a small but cozy farmer's house, one of several around the fort here. And speaking of the fort, we're going to take a quick look inside, though obviously it's going to be a bit empty with the lack of NPCs and all. But at least it'll give you an idea of the sort of interiors you'll come across. And, you know, I have to say that overall, most of the interiors in Empire are, you know, pretty well designed, from shops, taverns, and common residences. It looks like CarrotFerret has hand-built each one, which is no easy feat when you consider the sheer number of interiors included in this project. We're talking about over 100 interiors, I believe. And anyway, moving on, we're next going to be stopping by a miner station out in, I believe this is Hammerfall. And this is a small trading outpost, probably somewhere in the wastes of the Alakir Desert, built up around a Dwemer tower, and you'll have to, you know, keep in mind that since the Empire mod is interior only, some of the landscapes can be a bit flat, since they're, you know, made out of terrain meshes rather than the more dynamic terrain editor included in the construction set. You'll also notice the architecture is a bit different here, from using the desert building tile set, which also comes with some unique looking interiors, as you might imagine. Now, underneath this small town in Hammerfall is a surprisingly bigger city that utilizes the existing Dwemer ruins, where the locals have refurbished these old dwarven halls and turned them into homes, shops, and taverns to take advantage of any trade from along the nearby railroad. And this has led to some pretty neat looking mixed use interiors, where more Imperial style finishings sit alongside Dwemer ones, making for a unique setting. Of course, for the most part, there's still no NPCs in here, but you will see a few around the tavern. And once again, this just goes to show the variety and creativity of the locations that you'll get to visit in the Elder Scrolls 3 Empire. And the next city we're going to be coming up on here is the city of Dragonstar, which sits alongside the Hammerfall and Skyrim border, divided into two with an Imperial peacekeeping presence in the center to keep the two sides from killing each other. Now, obviously, we need to acknowledge that this is a very different interpretation of Dragonstar than what you'll find in Skyrim Home of the Nords, and again, it has to be said that Empire is an adventure mod, not a province mod. So a strictly lore accurate and largely 2-scale city shouldn't be expected here, but I just have to say, you know, how cool is it that in 2017 we have not one, but 2 different mods or versions of Dragonstar in them for a 15-year-old game? You gotta admit that's pretty awesome, right? And it just goes to show how amazing our modding community is. But anyway, the Empire version of Dragonstar has a lot of style mixing and different architecture types, and used to, you know, denote the 2 districts here, with a desert architecture representing the Hammerfall side, and Imperial/Nordic architecture representing the Skyrim side, which makes for an interesting mix of styles to be sure. And moving on though, a rather major difference between the Skyrim Home of the Nords version of Dragonstar and Empire's here is the inclusion of a quite frankly massive arena right next to the city. Now presumably this is where the local Red Guards and Nords go to fight out their differences legally, given the two do historically have a lot of hostilities. And like I said before, there is a fair amount of wilderness locations included in Empire, such as forests, scenic paths through the woods, the occasional lake or river, and again, all this is interior based, so it has no impact on the exterior world space. You can just explore everything here without risk of running into, any mod conflicts, though you might find a few dungeons or isolated houses and farmsteads out here. And our next and final stop is the city of Wayrest in the province of High Rock, where this new train line evidently ends. And Wayrest is a pretty big city of canals, towering townhouse-style abodes, shops and taverns, scenic walkways, and a couple of plazas here and there. Built right along the famous Oak Bay, Wayrest is a, sort of harbour town. And in case you're wondering, yes, most of these buildings here do already have interiors for them. It'll be interesting to see what sort of quests you'll get to do in Wayrest once this mod is actually fully finished. But for now, it's a pretty scenic place to explore, taking full advantage of Erebus's excellent Imperial housing resource. The city is more or less where the Empire Alpha ends. There are some wilderness and farming areas outside the city that you can visit as well, though we'll get to that later on. And in any event, what's already here is, pretty big, and Empire is certainly an impressive project, especially given that the whole thing has been, pretty much built by only one modder. There's already hours and hours of content here, even without any quests, and I have to say I'm really looking forward to the final product, whenever it might release. And just real quick, there's a few more things I want to show you guys before we finish the showcase here. And the first is this small farming area outside of Wayrest, which is bordered on almost all sides by forest, and yes, you can actually travel into the forest a bit, though it's separated into its own interior cell, and there's a fair bit of wilderness and, some dungeons out there to explore. And lastly, I did want to show off a few of the interiors in Wayrest, and starting out, we have one of the taverns in Wayrest. Though it might be a bit best described as a pub, I suppose, with a bar-like area in front and some more secluded seating, with a library and fireplace in the back for patrons to go to relax. And moving on to our next interior here, you can see the Wayrest branch of the Mages Guild. And I don't know if the author plans to include these guilds as fully functional factions with quests or not, but both the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild have branches in Wayrest, so there's, certainly some possibility that we'll see Fighter and Mages quests, and if that's the case, we'll probably see some Thief quests too. And one last thing, there's also a few dungeons underneath the city of Wayrest itself, including, I believe, some sewers, crypts, and, possibly more that I may have missed. And again, there's just a ton of content in this mod, but we've come to the end of our showcase here, and I hope this gives you at least some idea of what to expect from Empire here, and hopefully you'll, check it out or offer to help out with the project. I know I, for one, am certainly, quite excited to see more. And anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time with our next batch of mods.